My name is Peter Hughes, and I'm a regional vice president with Mayo Clinic. And Sunny asked me and the company that she works with if I would come up and talk about compression planning. I've been using compression planning since 1986, so 28 years I've been doing it. And I learned it from the same people that the people here at Normandale learned it from, and so they asked me to do that. So I have no connection to the company in terms of I'm not an employee of the company or part of the Institute here. I'm just a longtime user and really believe in it, so I really did want to come up and see if I couldn't help kick off the Institute here, the Minnesota Institute. So as I said, I started in 1986, and why did I get started in compression planning? Well, I had a colleague in healthcare who mentioned it to me. I think actually I was over at their hospital and I saw these funny cards on a board, and I remember asking her what they were about, and she says, "Oh, I'll give you an information book on it." We had some task we had to do, and she was very task-oriented, so we didn't work on that, and she gave me that, and I took it, filed it away, and then shortly after that I joined another healthcare system. And once I got there, I was again reminded about how annoyed I was getting at bad meetings and poorly run work groups and task groups and things like that. So that was why I got interested in finding something that would help me, me personally and others to run better meetings. I had put the materials in my file. We had called on General Electric, one of their regional headquarters. We were there to talk to them about healthcare plans. And we walked in, and the walls of each executive's office had cork on it with all these cards stuck in it, and I knew I'd seen it before. They took us into a conference room that was literally labeled the war room. And inside the room, there was a box like you'd see for flip chart paper laying there, and it had the name Mike Vance, storyboarding, and it had a phone number. And so I had asked somebody about it, and they said, yeah, that's the guy to call. So I called to see about getting training. Well, it turns out Mike Vance had retired by that time, and he referred me to a company called the McNellis Company. Now, there's a family tree here. They talk about it starting with Leonardo da Vinci, but I don't think he was doing compression planning quite exactly. But it is a Disney process, and it started in the 30s with the Disney people. And in their Disney University, they taught this to their Imagineers, and it comes from the advertising world and the film world and the newspaper industry. So you'll see terminology that comes from all those, but it's not like any of them. It's not the storyboards they use at ad agencies exactly. And then Mike Vance was a Disney guy, and so he left the company, retired. He started doing this training. And then he retired, but before he retired, he trained a guy named Jerry McNellis, and Jerry McNellis trained me. So that's the family tree. So that's the McNellis Company. So if you Google compression planning, it will come up, the McNellis Company, and they're out of Pittsburgh. And they're now also, I know, is a website for Normandale Community College, and it's the Minnesota Compression Planning Institute, because they're now going to become a center in the Midwest. Typically, you're going to use it for stuff that's high-powered, important decisions in business. So I told you who I was. I think if you didn't come in, I'm Peter Hughes. I'm a regional vice president at the Mayo Clinic, and so and I've been using this for 28 years. That's why I got into this, because of bad meetings. And I spent 10 years as a teacher, a high school teacher and a college professor, and then I went into healthcare, and I've worked in the two industries that do most of their work by committee. And I saw so many bad meetings being led by others, and of course part of my job, because of what I do, is leading a lot of groups. And I wanted to find more effective ways to do that. So in my job, what I do, I do a lot of strategic planning, and which means service line planning, programmatic planning, business plans. I'm also responsible for marketing. The region I'm responsible for in Mayo Clinic is parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. I also do work at the system level, so primarily marketing, business development, planning. I also have some other areas that report, but those are the areas in which I use this a lot. You all mentioned the kinds of jobs you have, and I can tell you that everything you told me that you do, you can use compression planning. I often feel like I'm the Billy Graham of compression planning because I'm that enthusiastic about it. It is not a process improvement process. It is not, it's not any one kind of it's a process. It is an approach to leading teams, engaging people, facilitating them, and so it's a technique of facilitation. It's a form of a process, but is extremely flexible and adaptable to anything. So if you tell me you're a project manager, I'm going to tell you you can use compression planning. If you're just brainstorming new concepts and ideas, you can use compression planning. If you're designing a marketing plan or a business plan or strategic plan, you can do compression planning. If you want to debate the different options between, this option A, B, or C, and do pros and cons, you can use it. If you want a flow chart and do a process flow diagram, if you want to do lean work or any type of quality improvement, you can do and use compression planning. The fact that I think the greatest compliment in my career has been the number of times I've been asked by my leadership to specifically, would you come and do a compression planning session for our group because we're having a problem and can't solve it. My CEO and chief medical officer asked me to call me into the CEO's office, very serious, and I didn't know if I was in trouble or whatever, but they had just come from another medical executive committee meeting. They'd been spending a year trying to solve a particular issue and had gotten nowhere. And so both of them had been through sessions with me for planning and that, and said, would you lead a session with our medical executive committee? Now this is outside of, the topic was completely outside of my area of expertise, but we did it, and we ran a 3-hour session, and we resolved and put together a solution in 3 hours that they hadn't been able to get done in a year. I've had that experience over and over with this process, and I think if you go on the McNellis website, you'll see examples of things they've done, just some amazing stories of what people have been able to achieve. And the reason it's called compression planning is because it compresses the time to get from idea to implementation. I have people tell me often, I've never been in a better planning session. It's the best planning session I've ever been in, or I cannot believe how much we got done. I was showing, I'm sorry, your first name is? Angie and Sonny, some photographs from some retreats I've done, and you'll see these boards filled with cards. And I said to them, all those boards you see, we did that in 4 hours. And I think so people are impressed by how much work you get done, because what are they not impressed by? All the meetings they sit in, you called it swirling instead of spinning, but not going anywhere. And so those are all the things I like about it. The other thing I like about it is we know that about adult learners, and we know a lot of things, but there's perceptual thinking patterns, and so we're visual, we're auditory, but we're also kinesthetic, meaning movement. And if you're one of those people that sit there and you're flipping your thumb like this, okay, I do this when I sit. That's being kinesthetic. That's what I have. Sometimes I have to walk and get up on my feet to think, and a lot of us are that way. So this process is visual, it's auditory, and it's kinesthetic, and it works well for those three types of thinking styles that people have, to engage all three of those. Now, usually we're more one of those in the front, one of those in the far back, one in the middle, so we may be more auditory in the back and not a big talker, but we're very visual. I'm very visual in terms of how I learn. So it incorporates that, and it gives an order to chaos. And because I do planning, I would say to you that structure is liberating. Look at any group of young children and give them structure and see how that liberates them, because otherwise it becomes so chaotic that nothing happens. And I think you can think of the number of meetings that happens. And I train all of my marketing staff and all of my planning staff, and then all of my direct reports. And I have sent a lot of people over the years to do this. I think it's the best training I've professionally had in the 31 years I've been in healthcare. Because not only do you learn a technique that I think is a gift, and I say that because it has changed my career. I think I have a good reputation for being a good leader of facilitated meetings and things like that, and part of what I do for a living, being a planner. I think my staff have found it that it's something that has enhanced their careers. And I say that because I see how other leaders in the organization look at them as they help them do stuff, like the division chair who had a couple of my people come over and do this process. And so I think it's pretty powerful. So let me hit on a few other things and I'll show you a little bit and then we'll look at these videos. So I probably personally do about 50 sessions a year. I think I'm lowballing it because a session could be an hour, it could be all day. So in my career, I've probably done over 1,500 in my career. I know I've done over 250 as a volunteer for my community. So one of the neat things I never thought about was when I came back that it could turn into a way I could volunteer. And how that happened is I did it internally, and so one of my colleagues who's on the board of the United Way said, could you help us with it? And that started the process, and it's been a wonderful way that I could volunteer. And I'm not saying you want to do it for that reason, but it's just been a useful thing that I have personally done in my community. I think in terms of benefits to you, it's extremely flexible, extremely adaptable, extremely applicable to a lot of different problem-solving process, plans, etc. So if you do business plans or marketing plans or strategic plans, I mean those have itemized list of tasks that you have to do. It's perfect for that. It's also perfect when you don't have a roadmap and you need to create the roadmap. So it's very multi-purpose. I like it because it engages people, because it is visual, because it is auditory, it does get in the kinesthetic, but it also, there are ground rules. When I learned this in 1986, total quality management, continuous quality improvement, all those old names they had for performance improvement, that was just hitting. And some of the ground rules and things that you now have in meetings that you've been exposed to, I'd never heard those before because they weren't out there. Now they are. So you might be familiar with Lean or those types of applications, and if I told you about the ground rules, you go, oh, I've had that. But what I'd emphasize is that the meeting has structure. Remember I said structure is liberating? Well, one of the things we do, you know, I'm an executive and I work with other executives. So not only executives, anybody at any level, but you've got these high-powered people in a room maybe that I work with. And they've become expert over the years at shutting each other down. You throw out an idea and I go, oh, that's a dumb idea. And then you're pretty brazen, so you later on throw out another idea and that's dumber than the first idea. And eventually I shut you down. Or, you know, I throw out an idea and you throw your hat up in the air, you know, and she falls on the floor laughing and she rolls her eyes. We have verbal and nonverbal cues and ways to shut people down. So these ground rules are for everybody, and we hold ourselves accountable to them, and things like suspend judgment. Let the idea get out. Let's kill ideas, not people. So I always tell people that's the bite your tongue rule. One of the problems we have with brainstorming, Jerry doesn't like the McDonald's, they don't like the term, I still like the word brainstorming, but most people don't know how to brainstorm. Let's brainstorm. You throw out an idea and she says, well, I don't like that. You say the students will never get it. The older faculty will never understand it. You start killing it off before we even can explore the idea. And so we allow critical and creative thinking to interact, and they don't interact. You need to do creative thinking, that's out of one side of the brain, and then critical thinking, and you need to do both, because we need to take and have an explosion of ideas, and then we need to narrow our focus to the best ideas. All ideas are welcome. It calms people down. You have rules that you can make fun of that people are like, oh, I don't have to worry about my spelling. Don't use acronyms or abbreviations unless everybody understands them. So we all understand a dollar sign, but you wouldn't. Think about my world in healthcare. I sit in meetings. Can you imagine some of the stuff I hear? I have to stop and ask people, what is that? And I've been in it 31 years, so I know a lot of it. Well, you work in banking. There's terms you guys use that the rest of us wouldn't know. we do that in these mixed groups, and in a fashion it can shut you down. So the rules are designed to enhance the whole process. No sidebar conversations. Again, you've heard these things before, but this is very structured. We have a set of rules that we agree on in the meeting, and then there are roles in the meeting of who's a facilitator, who's going to pin the cards, who's going to print the cards. And so there is order, and yet it allows us to be very, very creative. I think it helps us focus. It's very fast. It can be fast. You can slow it down, so you can change speeds, but it can be very fast. I think people like it. You'll see a quote of mine on the website, but what I've seen over the years is people enjoy it. It's fun. It makes planning fun. You'll find that you can just use parts and pieces of it. You don't have to use the whole full-blown 7-step planning process that you're going to learn, but you can take and use parts and pieces of it, and I think that's one of the flexibility issues with it. Like communication plans that many people in their line of work don't think about. They think that marketing and communications does that, but the aspect of having a plan and action steps, and then how is that communicated. So there's parts of this process that I think are very effective.